Hi there, and welcome to the Student Legal Services presentation, Under 21, Don't Be Dumb, and Other Life Lessons from Your Lawyer. We are Student Legal Services, and we appreciate you taking the time to watch this presentation. We think that the information provided to you will be very useful in your time at OSU and really provide you with some insight into what goes on at OSU and what your criminal rights and responsibilities are. We're going to focus mainly on drinking related charges because it's a college campus and that's a lot of the focus, but we are going to cover a variety of areas. So to get started, I just want to cover Student Legal Services as a whole. You guys know what we do. So we have several attorneys in our office and that are divided up into two teams. We have a civil team and a criminal team. We are a nonprofit law firm that has a contract with the university to provide legal services, including advice, representation, education, and resources to you guys, to the students. This is our only job. You guys are our full client base, and we are the lawyers for students. We assist thousands of students each year and help you guys save or get hundreds of dollars for students in a variety of different legal matters. You might think you need us, but you may, whether it's a traffic accident or a landlord-tenant matter. So we do offer a lot for the students, and we are here for you. We do have strict confidentiality as attorneys. So we want you to know that anything that we discuss with you is not something that gets turned over to the university. We are not mandatory reporters, and we take that confidentiality very seriously. This is our staff. As I said, my name is Allie Tucker, and I am the chief counsel of the criminal team. And on my team, I have two individuals who you will hear from today. They are Erin Woods and Cody Reed. Then we have the civil team, which consists of Molly Phillips, Paul Wilkins, Andy Pfeiffer, Frank Kramer, and Tresha Patel. Our managing director is Molly Hagerty, and our paralegals are Jackie Harmon, Courtney Froh, and Amy Meeks. As I said, we do cover and offer services in a variety of different legal areas. This is a list. It is not a comprehensive list, but it is a pretty good representation of everything that we do. All of you at some point are going to live off campus. And when you make that decision, it's a big deal. And it requires a lot of commitment from you. So our biggest area of representation is in the off-campus housing area. We want you guys to come to us before you're signing these contracts so you know what you're signing and what your rights and responsibilities are. And then once you're living off campus, we also want you to come to us if you're experiencing problems with the property or with your landlord or anything else. Like I said, it's our biggest area of representation. Today we're going to talk about criminal misdemeanors and traffic offenses. The other areas include consumer transactions, credit and debt issues, identity theft, dissolutions, contracts, wills and estate planning, notary, victim assistance, and immigration and naturalization. So as you can see, there is quite a bit of opportunities for you guys to need our services. We provide advice only if you just need to speak with a lawyer, but you don't need active representation. But we also provide representation all the way through court hearings, trials, hearings, anything that's needed. If you're unsure of what we do, call and make an appointment. We can at least point you in the right direction. At this time, we are going to ask you to assess your risk of alcohol abuse. This might not be something that you feel comfortable talking about, but we just want you to take out your phones, go to go.osu.edu/screening, and take an opportunity to assess your alcohol use. This is not to judge you or make you feel bad, but we think it's important for you to get a general idea of your own use. It's anonymous, it's not being reported, and at the end, you will be given a list of resources that are available to you. We think it's important for you to take this screening tool so that when we're offering you the information during this presentation, some of it may be more important to you than others, but we want you to know what's important for you. But this time, I'm just going to give you a couple minutes. Go ahead and take the screening tool, and then we'll start back up again. Okay, so hopefully at this point you finished the screening tool and gotten to the last page. And if you had trouble with it, I should have mentioned that you need to scroll down to the screening for alcohol use specifically. So you can always take this after the presentation, but now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Cody Reed, who's going to talk to you guys about an issue that is very frequent coming in our door about underage drinking, fake ID, and furnishing alcohol to a minor. Cody's going to cover those issues with you.
Okay, so picking up where Ali left off, we're going to talk about some of the most common stuff we see as far as the criminal charges that we deal with. And for that, I mean, obviously with a college campus, underage drinking is going to be a large part of that. Fake IDs and furnishing are kind of associated with that same idea. So going along with that, talking about underage, that encompasses two things. It's going to be underage possession and underage consumption. That doesn't have to be both. It's kind of an either or. So to start with the common ways we see underages, so bars is going to be a very common way. The state has undercover officers, and they're involved with a lot of the different ways we see these. But in bars, you'll see undercovers that will just kind of hang out in your bar, and they will wait for someone to approach who looks like they're under the age of 21. And then when they go to actually buy the drink, they will walk up, show their badge, and ask that you show ID. If you make the mistake of showing them your fake ID, you will likely also be charged with fake. We'll get into that in a second, but that's probably one of the most common ways we see is just bars and the undercover sitting in them. Also game days, which I know currently we're not expecting to have game days this year, but for any sort of like large gatherings or parties, again, the state will have undercovers who just kind of walk around in OSU gear, and they try to blend in, and they will catch people leaving house parties, and people will take, a drink with them to walk from one party to the next, and then they can just walk up and approach you because you now have an open container. They'll ask for your ID, and there you go. Again, if you show them the fake, you'll end up with a fake as well. But oftentimes they figure out you're underage and you'll get started that way. Other ways we see going with a friend who is 21 or someone who has a fake in order to help them carry alcohol. Again, you don't have to actually consume the alcohol, merely possessing it is enough to complete the charge. So the second that your friend purchases the alcohol, hands it to you, you have committed all of the necessary elements to be charged with the underage consumption or possession. The other one that we see is, again, and we'll get into this in a minute too when I talk about disorderly conduct, but it's going to be when somebody who has drank so much alcohol they can no longer care for themselves, or they're pretty clearly under the influence of alcohol. Officers then walk up to them, notice that they're, clearly under the influence of alcohol, and then throughout their investigation, it's revealed either from the person's own admission or, again, by obtaining ID that they're under the age of 21. So on top of being charged with potentially disorderly conduct, they'll also get charged with the underage. Now, I brought up fakes quite a bit during that. Officers are aware that pretty much everybody has a fake, or at least, large quantities of students have fakes. So the best advice we can kind of give is there's no point in lying. If you're approached for an underage and asked for ID, there's no point in lying and telling them, oh yeah, I'm 21, and then handing them the fake ID, because it will take them all of about 30 seconds to run your fake ID through dispatch. It will come back as fake, and then they will most definitely charge you with that fake ID. So there are some circumstances where we've seen that officers won't charge students if they're upfront and they say, yes, I have a fake ID and here it is. That's not a guarantee if they won't charge you. Depending on the officer, they may still walk up and end up charging you with a fake ID as well. But here's the thing. Even if you do not give them your fake ID, or you say, I don't have ID, but I'm 21, ultimately, when they arrest you for the underage, they're going to conduct what's called a search incident to a lawful arrest, which essentially gives them the ability to inventory what you have on you. So your wallet, your phone, and they're going to find your fake ID. And then because you told them that you didn't have one, they are, again, most likely going to charge you with that fake ID because they gave you the opportunity to tell them that you had it and you didn't, so now they're going to charge you. Again, there's no guarantee that even if you tell them, you may still end up with an officer who's going to charge you for both the fake ID and the underage. But again, we have seen on occasion where if you are upfront with the officers, you tell them you have a fake, that they don't end up charging you for that. And that can help us when it gets to the point where we're actually going to court and talking with prosecutors about the case. Obviously, I think it's pretty intuitive. The fewer the charges, sometimes the better negotiating an offer can be on a case. So again, that's why we would like to see just the underage. But we're talking about now too, so an underage and a fake ID, they're both considered misdemeanors of the first degree. That is the highest degree of misdemeanor that we have under Ohio law. Misdemeanors of the first degree carry with them a maximum penalty of up to 180 days in jail, up to a $1,000 fine, 500 hours of community service, and 5 years of probation. So again, pretty strict penalties. Now, obviously, we don't expect students to be even taken to jail on these charges, although, again, it can happen, and we don't expect you to actually have to spend any time in jail on these. Again, it could. It's still, you can tell the stakes are high. Again, it's the highest degree of misdemeanor that does exist in Ohio, so pretty high stakes. Commonly, if you are charged with that and it's a first offense, we are usually able to get that to a point where we can get you diversion. If you're charged with both an underage and a fake, sometimes we can get you diversion plus community service. But again, all of this varies. There's no real guarantee. And Aaron's going to talk about the complexities of COVID and how that's kind of changing things. But just to kind of incorporate that in here, there's a likelihood that prosecutors may be less willing to make those sort of offers now because of COVID and because of the inherent risk someone's taking by going out and drinking, especially underage. So again, I don't know that that's the case, but it's something to definitely consider. And we may end up running into prosecutors being less willing to make offers on the cases because they're trying to, incorporate COVID into the totality of the circumstances, if you will. Anyway, the other thing that's listed on this slide is furnishing. So again, furnishing, you don't have to be 21 to furnish because again, with the large population of students who have fakes, if you go to a liquor store with a fake, you buy beer, and then you hand it to someone who is under the age of 21, even though you are also under the age of 21, you have just furnished alcohol to that person. And again, if you bought it with a fake ID and you are also under the age of 21, you can be charged with the trifecta of underage consumption or possession, fake ID, and furnishing. Again, we also see it as just something as little as asking someone to hold a drink. So someone who is 21, or again, someone who's also underage, handing a drink to someone and asking them to hold it for them. Again, as simple as that may sound, it may not sound like a big deal. It does, in fact, encompass furnishing. So we have seen that. It sounds really petty, but it does happen. So just know that. Just the simple act of handing someone something to hold for you is enough. Lastly, the only thing I want to add with furnishing is that is also it has the similar penalties of a misdemeanor of the first degree. It's actually considered an unclassified misdemeanor, and the reason for that is it actually has a minimum fine of $500. So if you're charged with furnishing, a judge cannot give you less than a $500 minimum fine if you ultimately plead guilty or are found guilty of that charge. It still carries with it, again, up to 180 days in jail and up to a $1,000 fine. So a judge could give you a larger fine. But again, $500 minimum. And also worth noting, furnishing is just viewed by prosecutors a little bit more harshly. Sometimes it's based on the misconception of, they picture in their head an adult providing alcohol to minors. And oftentimes in our scenario, it is going to be other minors providing alcohol or someone who's 21 providing alcohol to somebody who's 20. But again, furnishing is still treated somewhat more harshly by prosecutors. So worth keeping that in mind. Again, this is going to be the majority of what we see. Again, as you would imagine, with a college campus, we're going to see a lot of stuff surrounding underage. We are usually able to get pretty favorable results from prosecutors, but again, COVID does bring a whole new dynamic into this, so we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Next, just talk about drug charges briefly. So is marijuana legal? That's something that kind of comes up a lot. Again, with a lot of states having legalized marijuana, that's a question that a lot of people have, especially those who come from other states. So the simple answer is no. In the state of Ohio, marijuana is not legal. There is a bit of a discrepancy as far as the city of Columbus. It's a misconception that it is no longer illegal in the city of Columbus. That's incorrect. It is still illegal. However, the city of Columbus, so just that municipality, the city of Columbus, they don't prosecute minor misdemeanor possession or drug paraphernalia related to only marijuana anymore. That's a decision made by the city attorney, and they just they choose not to prosecute those cases. However, every other municipality that surrounds Columbus or is part of Columbus, they still do prosecute marijuana cases, both, again, just minor misdemeanor marijuana possession as well as drug paraphernalia. When I say minor misdemeanor, a minor misdemeanor is the lowest level offense that there is in the state of Ohio, and it is punishable by up to a $150 fine. That is what a small quantity of personal use marijuana. That's what the charge carries. And I know that, I say it's the lowest level charge, so that makes people go, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. Again, it's important to know for you all, especially if you're receiving federal financial aid, that a drug charge could disqualify you from receiving that aid. So again, although it's very minor under the law, it's a minor misdemeanor, it seems like no big deal. It could have a huge impact on you if you are convicted of it, because again, it could make you not eligible for federal financial aid. So again, other things to talk about when it comes to marijuana. CBD oil is now legal. It's sold in stores, Walgreens, CVS. You can pick up CBD oil everywhere at this point, so it is legal. So that's not in question anymore. It used to be. We've already talked about how it is still illegal. Again, City of Columbus doesn't prosecute, but that doesn't stop any of the surrounding ones when it comes to being on campus. Upper Arlington is a short drive away. They still prosecute it. All of the suburbs prosecuted. So again, not to be confused, it is still illegal. And then as far as ways of purchasing marijuana and what we see problems with, I think this should be obvious, but again, if you are messaging someone to buy marijuana from them, you have just provided great evidence to the prosecution of both the selling and buying of marijuana. It is just a horrible idea to create digital records of the sale and purchase of drugs. Again, I think that should be rather obvious, but sometimes it appears not to be. So again, one, you shouldn't be doing that to begin with, but two, it's just a very bad way to go about doing that, because again, you're providing great evidence for your own prosecution as well as the prosecution of whoever has provided it to you. So keep that in mind. And then tobacco, again, because we're primarily talking to first year students here who are going to be under the age of 21, tobacco is illegal to possess, smoke, chew, dip, all of the above if you are under the age of 21. Again, that also includes vapes, jewels, whatever it could be. Again, if it's considered a tobacco product and you have to be 21 to buy it, if you were in possession of it, caught smoking it, caught chewing it, whatever it is, you can be charged. We don't see a ton of those. Again, I think that's largely because tobacco use has kind of gone down. But again, with jewels and other things, it's gonna happen inevitably. So you got to make sure that if you're under 21, you are not using that, and if you are, that you are definitely not using it in public, where you could be approached by an officer who could charge you with it. Other charges, so this is kind of a long list, but as far as the most common, again, I think I already made reference to disorderly conduct earlier when we were talking about ways that people can get charged with underage. So disorderly conduct is a really broad statute. There's one that's both under, there's a city code statute and a state code statute. They're both very similar and they're very broad. A lot of prosecutors use this as almost a catch-all, if you will. But we most commonly see it for someone who is, again, drunk and unable to care for themselves. You see it, somebody's been at a party, or again, if we're using a game day analogy, somebody's been at a game and they're being helped home by their friends. Officers are going to approach, see that this person is being assisted, and ask for that person to walk on their own. When they inevitably can't, they'll be charged with disorderly conduct, as well as, again, potentially underage if they are underage. So again, it's the person who's just overtly intoxicated. We see it sometimes if somebody's drank so much that they've passed out in a public place, and an officer will come upon them, and usually they're going to have to call EMTs, have you taken to the hospital, so you're going to have to deal with that as well. But then you also get charged with both disorderly conduct and potentially underage if you're under the age of 21. The other way, disorderly conduct, not a lot of ours, but again, because it's so broad, one of the parts of disorderly conduct is violent or turbulent behavior. Sometimes it's either people who have drank too much or people who just are just being kind of obnoxious in public. If you're trying to start a fight with somebody, you're just screaming, being belligerent in public, you can be charged with disorderly conduct. Sometimes it's a pretext to a fight. People don't actually fight, but they're bumping chests, screaming at each other, yelling, causing a scene. If officers encounter that, even though no punches have been thrown, anybody who is screaming, again, causing a scene, being belligerent, can be charged with disorderly conduct. Not a regular way we see that, but it is possible. Next, obstruction of official police business. That we see in a couple of different ways. Sometimes it's interfering with the arrest of another. So say you're out and about, or let's just use the example that you're helping a friend home, since we were just talking about that with disorderly conduct. You and a friend have been out drinking, friend had too much to drink, you're helping them get home, walking with them and helping them get home. Officer makes them stand by themselves, ends up telling them that they're they're too drunk, they can't care for themselves. They're going to charge them with disorderly conduct, take them to the hospital, all that. And then you try to interfere with that and say, no, they're fine. I'm going to get them home. I'll take care of them, blah, blah, blah. The second you start interfering and getting in the officer's way of them doing their job, they're going to charge you with obstructing official business. Obstructing official business is a misdemeanor of the second degree. It's the second highest level misdemeanor, punishable by up to 90 days in jail. Again, you don't want to. At that point, if the officers have encountered your friend and they've already seen him in that state, there's nothing you can do. There's no point in interfering with that. In fact, it's probably best to just get out of that circumstance, make sure that you are free to leave and just get out of there. You don't want to be involved with that, and you don't want to potentially put yourself at risk of being charged criminally. And again, once they've approached and they've started with that, odds are your friend is already too far gone, and they're going to be cited at that point. The other way we see obstruction of official business is running. People will try and run away from the police. Again, almost never works, but if you try and run away from the police, they ultimately catch you. They can charge you with obstructing official business for running. They can also charge you with resisting, which we'll talk about here in a second, depending on how that goes as far as them eventually get into you. If they have to tackle you and take you to the ground and ultimately handcuff you, then again, they could charge you with ultimately resisting. If they ultimately are just running behind you for a while and you give up, then they'll probably just charge you with obstructing. Again, it's not worth figuring out the ambiguities. Just don't run. If they've already caught you, just deal with the circumstances, and you can come see us and we'll help you out with the best we can. There's no point running. It's just going to make your circumstances worse. And as I'll get into right now, we'll talk about resisting. Resisting is exactly what it sounds like. They're trying to put you in handcuffs. You're pulling away. You're not giving up your hands. You're pushing, fighting, whatever it may be. It's not a good idea. For your own safety, it's not a good idea. You shouldn't do it. Even if you think you're being wrongfully arrested, or you think it's no big deal, or whatever it may be, you need to just comply for your own safety. You don't want to risk getting hurt. You don't want to risk escalating the circumstances from, again, what may be something that's not that big of a deal and making it into something that has now become a huge deal. So you don't want to get involved with that. But when you get to the point of resisting, also you run into the risk of potentially causing harm to an officer. And if you do that, then you're looking at potential felony charges. There's just a lot that could go wrong with resisting. I think it's pretty obvious. Not going to go into that a whole lot more, other than to say it is also a misdemeanor of the second degree. So again, it's punishable by up to 90 days in jail. Again, not something you want to mess with. And then other things we see, littering. This comes from just trash from parties, people walking out of house parties, throwing a beer can on the ground. Again, it's pretty obvious what littering is. Don't think I have to go into that in great detail for you guys, but it's punishable by a $500 fine and up to 60 days in jail. It's a misdemeanor of the third degree. Again, just don't do it. Just throw stuff in the trash, throw stuff in a recycling bin, leave stuff inside the house. Don't walk out and throw it on the ground. It's just putting yourself at risk. Occasionally we'll see littering associated with an underage, where officers are walking up to you because they suspect that you're drinking and you're underage, and you just throw the beer on the ground. As like an instinct of, oh, well, I'll just throw this on the ground and they can't prove it. It doesn't matter if they've seen it, and now that you've thrown the can on the ground, they could also charge you with littering if they really wanted to. So again, not worth it. Just don't throw stuff on the ground. Open container, again, of alcohol of any sort, red Solo cup, just a beer, anything that is open alcohol. It's been opened. It's a mixed drink. It's in some other cup. It doesn't matter if it's alcohol and you're out in the open. It's considered an open container. Open containers are a minor misdemeanor, so it's only punishable by up to a $150 fine. Again, usually associated with an underage, because that is the thing that gave the police rise to come and talk to you to begin with. So again, just brings attention to yourself. Don't walk around with open containers. Don't walk around with a beer. Don't take one for the road as you're walking to the next event or party that you're going to. It just draws attention to yourself and is going to give a police officer a reason to come up to you and stop you. Criminal trespass is one we see quite a bit of. So this is in large part cutting through construction. Campus has a lot of fences, a lot of construction, and people will come on it when they're trying to walk home. They'll be like, oh, let's just cut through here real quick because it's faster. Doesn't seem like that big of a deal. And there's a security officer or police officer nearby, and they'll encounter you doing that and charge you with criminal trespass. Criminal trespass and misdemeanor of the fourth degree. So that is punishable up to a $250 fine and 30 days in jail. you just don't want to cut through construction sites. I know it may not seem like a big deal, but again, those things can be super dangerous. You don't know, what the terrain's going to be like, if there's holes, if there's any sort of hazards that are in there. And I know a lot of time it does seem pretty harmless, like you're just trying to cut through a lot to get home faster. But just know that OSU in general takes it very seriously because it's a risk to students, and Columbus Police, private security, they just sit in these things. They pay someone as special duty to sit there and wait for people to do it. So it's just not worth the risk. Don't cut through it. Just walk around. It'll take you a little bit longer, but you won't get charged for the crime. So I guess that's the benefit. And you won't put yourself at risk of any sort of harm. So that's good. The other way we see is people go into the wrong house. Again, this kind of comes up with this having had too much to drink and forgetting where you live, or mistakenly thinking that one of these apartments that looks like yours is yours, and then passing out on the property or trying to go inside or things like that. We see it like that. Again, many of more serious crimes that you can be charged with, if you're talking about going into a home that is not yours because you confused it, your drunkenness would not be an excuse, to put it lightly. So, I mean, the potential felony problems there. But occasionally we do see just criminal trespass because people try and go into an apartment, the door's locked, and they'll just fall asleep on the porch or something. Again, that's still trespassing. So last way we see that tends to be towards the end of the year when everybody wants to go to the shoe and take pictures. So everybody decides it's a great idea to jump the fence. It's a terrible idea. There's video. OSU will respond very quickly. OSU PD, will respond very quickly. And yeah, you're going to get caught. Don't jump the fence to go take pictures. We see it every year. It's usually towards the end of the year because people want to take some pictures before they leave. It's a bad idea. Don't do it. Criminal damaging. Criminal damage is a misdemeanor to the second degree. Again, talked about the penalties for that before, up to 90 days in jail. Criminal damaging is usually, again, as it sounds, you've caused damage to somebody's property. A lot of times it's going to be cars. We've seen, like, after game days, somebody kick a car or, punch something that causes damage. It's just causing damage to property that is not yours. Again, it's pretty obvious. Don't do it. Again, misdemeanor to the second degree. Last one I was going to talk about is public urination. Again, self-explanatory crime there. It's a minor misdemeanor to do. Use a bathroom. Go inside. Wait. Go anywhere. There's lots of places around campus that have bathrooms. Just don't go to the bathroom out in public. It's an embarrassing thing to have to talk about. It's not something that you want to get charged with. So again, don't do that. Use a bathroom. Traffic. So we also do a lot of traffic cases. One thing that comes up quite a bit is insurance. And yes, you have to have insurance. If you're driving a car in the state of Ohio, you have to have valid insurance. There's not a separate crime for not having insurance in Ohio. It's not a separate citation. But what does happen is, say you are pulled over for speeding, and then you are ultimately found guilty of speeding, or you plead guilty, or what have you. On the ticket, there's a spot for the officer to mark whether or not you showed them insurance. And if you don't have insurance, they mark no. And then if you can't prove subsequently to the B&B that you had insurance when you were stopped by that police officer, then you get what is called an FRA suspension, which is essentially a suspension for not having insurance. So although there's not a separate charge for not having insurance, there is a suspension that comes with it. And then if you continue to drive with that suspension, there's obviously going to be a separate charge for driving under suspension. And it tends to add on quick. If you get caught once without insurance and then you don't fix it, now you're looking to drive under suspension. The next time you get caught, you'll get another suspension, and it just goes on, so on and so forth. It can add up. You need to have insurance. It protects you from, if you hit someone, being able to cover for it and, not having to pay out of pocket. It's pretty obvious. Again, just make sure you have insurance if you're out driving around on campus or anywhere in the state of Ohio for that matter. Hit skips, that's one thing that we see a little bit as well. Hit skips is essentially just getting involved in any accident that causes damage or injury to another, and then leaving the scene without giving the person the information that is required under law. Again, the important note here is if you're involved in an accident, causes any sort of damage or injury, other person wants to call the police, you want to call the police, you can't leave the scene of the accident. You just need to stay there. Hit skips are taken really seriously by prosecutors and by some judges. It's a misdemeanor to the first degree. So again, it has the same penalties that we've already talked about for that: 180 days in jail, $1,000 fine. But it also has a a mandatory license suspension that's built into it as well. And it's a minimum of 6 months up to 12 months for the license suspension. So you could, if you're convicted of this, you're going to lose your license for 6 months. And it's not great. So, and there's not a whole lot anybody can do about that because, again, hit, skips, carry, that is a mandatory suspension associated with being convicted of that. So, again, not something you want to trifle with. As you can see from the picture on the slide there, we've got some field sobriety tests going on. So OVIs, sometimes known as DUIs, DWIs in other states, essentially operating a vehicle while impaired. That's what it stands for here in Ohio. This shouldn't be something we really need to talk about. Don't do it. That's the most obvious thing. There are so many ways to get home. If you've been drinking in a major city like Columbus, there's Uber, Lyft, taxis, walking. There's a lot of different ways to go about getting yourself home safely. The penalties for OVI are substantial themselves, not to mention the harm you could cause to yourself or others by doing this. Anyway, that's my soapbox. Don't do it. But as far as OVIs, again, they're taken very seriously because, again, as I just said, a lot of risk involved. Not only would they be taken seriously by the court and prosecutors, but OSU is going to take it very seriously when you have to go in front of student conduct. It is a misdemeanor of the first degree. It has minimum penalties associated with it. The minimum penalties for a first offense OVI are a $375 fine, a 1 year's driver's right suspension, 3 days in jail, or 3 days in what is called a driver intervention program. Still not enjoyable. Better than jail, but not enjoyable. And then it carries with it, again, the possibility of probation. The important thing to know as well about OVIs is they're enhanceable. So if you ever get a subsequent one, then the minimum penalties go up and they get worse and they get worse. So again, it's not something you want to trifle with. You don't want to be driving after you've been drinking. It's just not worth the risk, even if it's a minimal amount of alcohol and you think you're okay. If there's another way to get around, and again, in Columbus and all major cities at this point, there always is, it's really just not worth the risk of doing it. The one thing I do always say as far as questions we get from people when it comes to OVI stops, again, you shouldn't be doing it. If for some reason you get stopped, no, you do not have to do standardized field sobriety tests, which is what's being depicted in this picture on the slide. You do not have to do those. Officers will ask you to get out of the car. You have to get out of the car, obviously. But when they ask you to do these tests, you do not have to do them. Just know that if you don't do them, you're likely going to be arrested because they're going to claim that they have enough evidence to arrest you at that point, and you'll probably be taken under arrest at that time, and you may be taken to jail because you refused their test. It's also quite possible. But again, you do not have to take standardized field sobriety tests. It is just a way that if you've had too much to drink, you're going to look bad. And there's very little you can do to stop that. And it's just going to further incriminate yourself. There's also the chemical test, which I think everyone is aware of, which is, taking a breath test or a blood test, a urine test, whatever it may be. You do not have to take that. If you don't, you're going to have your license suspended. That's part of the punishment for not taking one of those tests. But that's something we would handle in court if that does come up. Again, this is not a how to get away with an OVI speech. This is just your rights as it pertains to OVI stops. The best way to avoid this is to not drive after having drank. But again, enough said. Other things, texting while driving and distracted driving. This has come up a lot, obviously, with cell phones and people wanting to be communicating and texting while driving or checking things. The other thing that's worth noting here is the statute here in Ohio is really vague. Aaron and I talk about this a lot because the way it's written is it's connected to a web-based content. So if you're on your phone and connected to anything that is web-based, technically they could write you a ticket for this, for the texting while driving, because the way it's written. So it doesn't even have to be texting. It could be scrolling through Facebook. It could be listening to music on YouTube. It could be listening to technically Spotify, I think we've talked about before. There are lots of arguments we can make if this comes up in court, obviously. But again, just know if you are on your phone at all, especially if you're at a stoplight, you pick up your phone, you have it in your hand. There are a lot of officers who just sit there and wait for people to look down at their phones and start scrolling, and then they'll just walk up to your window, knock on the door. So, don't pick up your phone while you're driving. It's the best way to protect yourself. Don't be caught just staring down at your lap, looking at your phone while you're at a stoplight, because again, they're most likely just going to be waiting for you to do that. And so, distracted driving is like this newish thing that's been incorporated with the law, where now if you're cited with anything, any sort of traffic offense, and the officer believes that you were committing that offense or some part of it was that you were distracted. So you were on your phone or doing anything that made you distracted. Then they can charge you with this subsequent charge of distracted driving, which is essentially an enhancement that increases the fine that you would have to pay. This goes along with texting while driving too. Just don't admit to anything. It's commonly how we see this is someone would be pulled over for speed and the officer says, how fast you were going. And they say, oh no, I just looked down at my phone, so I must have just sped up. Or you committed a marked lanes violation, like you went over the lane line. Oh, sorry, I glanced at my phone because I got a text message. Oh, sorry, my phone was ringing. Or anything like that, you've just admitted to distracted driving. So again, you don't need to make any statements that incriminate yourself. But also, again, the main note here is just don't be on your phone while you're driving. Don't be distracted by it. Just kind of put it away so you don't have to worry about that stuff. And then last thing I'm really going to talk to you guys about is going to be grad school, employment, and sealing of the record. So I think the main thing that students are always concerned with when they come see us when they've been charged with something is how's this going to affect my record? And how's that going to affect me going forward? Because obviously you guys are all here studying so you can, obtain future employment and potentially go to grad school, do whatever it is you want to do. And so having a criminal charge on your record is something that you guys are all quite worried about. One good thing worth noting is most of what we've talked about so far, most of the things I've gone over, those are subject to sealing. Most of the crimes, the general ones I talked about. Now, the exception to that's going to be anything trafficked, especially OVIs. OVIs are non-sealable offenses. And anything traffic related is not sealable. If you get a speeding ticket, it's not sealable. But the criminal citations we talked about, underage, fake ID, furnishing, criminal trespass, all of those are subject to sealing. So even if you're convicted of them, we can potentially get them off your record again, provided you don't pick up any more convictions and a lot of other things that kind of go into that process. But it is worth knowing that even if you get charged with something, we can potentially get that sealed for you. Again, the process kind of differs based on the outcome of the case. Not going to get into the details of that, but it becomes a little bit easier to get it sealed if we were representing you on the underlying charge itself and we got dismissed. That we can take care of it a little bit easier. If it's a conviction, it just ends up being a little bit longer of a wait sometimes. Also worth noting here that there are some particular circumstances where we negotiate with the prosecutors, but they want you to have to wait 1 year to have it sealed. Oftentimes they do that so they can either go after the establishment if we're talking about an underage and someone served you. So they want that charge open so that way they can potentially go after their liquor license. Also, they just want to know if you pick up another one because they don't want to, if they're generous with you the first time and they make you what they think to be a good offer, and then within a few months you picked up another one. They want to know that you had the first one and they cut you a break so that way on the second one they can make sure that they are not nice, that they kind of do whatever they can to try to teach you a lesson, if you will. So again, important note is that we can potentially get those sealed for you. And if we are able to get a case sealed, the language is that you can treat it as though it never occurred. So if a case gets sealed, whether it was a conviction or a dismissal, at that point you can act like it never happened. But the caveat we always give is there are some jobs, some employers, and some career paths that you may choose that you're still going to have to disclose if you were charged. For instance, speaking from experience, when you go to law school, and you're filling out those applications, usually those questions are going to be phrased, have you ever been charged with a crime, charged, arrested, investigated, what have you, for a crime? And then in parentheses or somehow incorporated into the question, they will say, please include all crimes, even if they have been sealed or are subject to sealing. So obviously they want you to disclose. I know that that's become more common on other professional school applications as well as grad school applications. So again, even if you get it sealed, you may end up having to talk about that when you're applying for grad school, law school, any sort of professional school. That may be something that you end up having to bring up. Obviously, there are going to be some employers, if you're ever going to work for the government, if you're ever going to have to apply for security clearance, it's something that may come up and you may end up having to disclose because, again, those jobs are going to have better access and they're going to be able to see potentially sealed cases. So, again, we can usually help students out. We can usually get most of these cases sealed and taken care of. Just know that the best way to go about it is to not get the charges to begin with, because if you're going to try to apply to law school, professional school, want to work for the government, and you need government clearance, you're going to end up having to disclose it. And while it may not keep you from doing what you want to do in the long run, it's an uncomfortable conversation, and it'd be a whole lot better if you didn't have to deal with that. But that is my spiel about that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Erin so she can talk to you guys about COVID and all the fun complications that we're going through there, as well as some other topics. So I'll turn it over to Erin now.
Hi everyone, my name is Erin Woods. I will be going over the next several slides with you, starting out with hazing. So there are two different definitions for our purposes for hazing. So there's the Ohio Revised Code definition, which is listed here. That is straight from the law. If you were to engage in conduct that it lists there, then you could be charged with a misdemeanor of the 4th degree. The Student Code of Conduct, so OSU has a different definition, which is more broad, okay, about what hazing looks like, what it is, and your obligations in regards to not hazing and reporting. So if you notice the words in bold there, failure to intervene, prevent, or report acts of hazing in and of itself could be a violation of the Student Code of Conduct under the hazing portion of the Student Code. So that was not always the case, but they have added that into the Student Code, likely because, as you know, there have been some really unfortunate incidents at other colleges and universities, people that are getting really hurt. Some unfortunately have passed away from engaging in and participating in hazing. So OSU is taking this very seriously, okay? They want you to, they've essentially created a duty that you intervene, that you prevent it, that you are reporting it when you see it. Keep in mind that hazing is going to look a little different than maybe what you think it would. So it's not just somebody forcing someone else to drink alcohol or, you know, depriving them of their sleep. OSU has found that making somebody do push-ups or run around the block once or twice is enough to constitute hazing. That might not be common sense to you guys, but just know that the university is going to highly scrutinize the conduct on any type of fraternity or sorority event, any pledging that goes on. So keep in mind that you do have to report this, and you have a duty to step in if you're witnessing it. So along with that, certainly the most important things on here would be call 911 if you see anything that is threatening your safety or someone else's, okay? If someone doesn't look good to you and they look like they are hurt, they look like they're, you know, unconscious, blacked out, whatever, don't run the risk of saying, oh, that person's fine, and then a couple hours later it turns out they're not fine, okay? Be a good friend, look out for each other, call 911 if you need to, and of course, if you're seeing it, you should be reporting it. Don't think that you're not going to be called out. All they have to do is have one person that says, yep, there was a party at this fraternity house and it was had some hazing going on, and here's all the people that were there. If you get named and then they're like, oh, so-and-so was there, but oh, they weren't making the other person, you know, making the pledge do whatever, but they saw it happen, they didn't do anything about it, that could be a problem. You could be getting in trouble with student conduct for that. So this is what you should be doing if you think someone else is being hazed, or if you have been hazed. Make sure you guys follow the correct protocol. So how do you plan a safe event? How do you have an event with people and have a good time and everybody's safe? Well, in this day and age, don't have an event. You should not be hosting parties. You should not be having any events, any birthday parties, anything like that where there are going to be more than 10 people and those people aren't wearing masks, okay? Just stay home, don't have a party, don't host an event. It's just not the time for that. I know you guys want to have the same college experience as everyone else and have a good time. I promise you that you will, but just don't jeopardize yourself, your health, other people's health, and don't jeopardize your time here at the university. They are taking it very seriously, student conduct is. So if you are going to have an event, against my better judgment and my advice, you need to be making sure that you're doing things to prevent other people from drinking. If they're under 21, you need to be making sure you're providing a safe event for people, okay? So essentially you should be acting like how a bar would act if they had people in their place of business, right? You're checking IDs at the door, you're marking people with a stamp or a wristband, something to distinguish between those who are underage and those who are not. You should be having somebody who is, manning the beer station, who's going to do a good job of checking IDs again, making sure that nobody who's underage is having any access to the alcohol. Provide some non-alcoholic drink options for those people. We're not saying you can't have friends with people who are under 21. You yourself are probably under 21, but have some other options for people, okay? Post signs inside and outside that people underage are not allowed to drink. That saves you from some liability in the future. If, let's say, cops come by, you guys are hanging out on the porch and there's some drinking going on and somebody's underage. Well, if you didn't provide the alcohol to them and you have some signs posted up, maybe the officer would be less willing to write you a ticket for furnishing, which is what Cody talked to you about earlier. You're doing all these things, planning a safe event, not only for you to keep you safe, but your friends too, okay? If somebody were to get hurt while they've been drinking alcohol at your house or in your dorm room, you could potentially be liable for what happens to that person, okay? So be safe, use your common sense, don't let anybody drink while they're underage. Kind of switching gears to talk a little bit more about COVID requirements. I'm going to talk about kind of what those requirements are under the law. So in Ohio and Columbus, and then I'm going to switch gears and talk about what the university is requiring you guys to do. So most of you probably know this is pretty standard across the board. You need to be wearing a mask at any indoor location that is not a residence, okay? Grocery stores, gas stations, everywhere. And if it's not your house, it's not somebody else's house, you need to be wearing a mask. You should also be wearing it outdoors if you can't maintain more than 6 feet from somebody else, or 6 feet or more from other people. Obviously, when you're operating or driving or riding public transportation, if you're in an Uber or a Lyft, same thing. Columbus kind of mirrors the Ohio law. Wear a mask in an indoor area if it's accessible to the public. You don't necessarily have to wear it outdoors, but under Ohio law you do, so just assume that you need to be wearing it at all times if you're not at home. The penalties for not complying with the ordinances and the law, you could be facing some civil penalties, okay? You're probably going to be issued a warning for first violations, okay? But if this is your second time having to be stopped, business is asking you, hey, you need to put on your mask, you're not doing it, then you're going to be looking at a $25 fine, okay? Businesses obviously would may face a higher penalty for these type of violations, but make sure you're complying and you're not getting any penalties as a result. If you do, of course, come see us and come talk to us. We would be happy to try to help you out. There is an appeals process for those that are cited for violations. It's time will tell how those kind of work. But like I said, if you run into any issues, please come see us. For OSU, I highly encourage you to go to safeandhealthy.osu.edu. That's going to be your main hub on where you want to go to look for what your duties are, what your obligations are, what your responsibilities are now that you're coming back to campus, and how to be safe. So you have to do that daily health check every time you intend to be on Ohio State's campus, okay? You have to maintain a distance of at least 6 feet from others, whether indoors or outdoors. Got to wear a mask, okay? Don't be gathering in groups of more than 10 people. Pretty self-explanatory, but make sure you're doing all these things, because if you don't, there's going to be some serious penalties. You will be referred to student conduct if you do not follow these guidelines, okay? And what I really want to point out here is that you have to be following OSU's guidelines, whether you are on or off campus, okay? This applies to your buddy's house, off of Chittenden. This applies to South Campus, North Campus, all of that. So it's not just while you are on campus. There are people from student life who are doing patrols on the weekends and during the week, walking around and writing down address of the people that they see partying that are in groups of 10 or more, not wearing masks, all that stuff, okay? Those people are getting reported back to student conduct, and they're facing suspension right now, okay? You could face immediate interim suspension, won't be allowed to access campus. You could be removed from all of your in-person classes. You could lose some of your privileges and benefits, such as the ability to buy athletic tickets. You could be on disciplinary probation, meaning if you were to get in trouble again, the penalties would be even worse. So they're taking it seriously. OSU doesn't want to shut down for some mass outbreak of COVID-19, okay? So that's why they are taking this very seriously, and they're going straight to interim suspensions. So don't take this lightly. They're not, they're not bluffing. They will suspend you. Make sure you guys are doing what you need to do, and keep referring back to that website if you are unsure of what your obligations are. There's going to have plenty of updates on there, a lot of information for you guys. Student conduct in general, they're not like the criminal justice system in the sense that to find a violation, they don't use the same standard that you would in, a criminal trial. So they use what's called a preponderance of the evidence standard, which means more likely than not, you violated the student code of conduct. Obviously, in a criminal case, someone would charge you with a crime. The state would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed a violation. Not the case with student conduct, okay? They go about things in their own way. They don't follow the rules of evidence. They don't have to do that. You don't get to have an attorney there to represent you, per se, okay? So they can't speak on your behalf, ask questions of witnesses on your behalf. All they can do is advise you and give you some advice and try to prep you for a hearing. We cannot represent you in a student conduct hearing. We would love to give you brief advice. We highly recommend that you come in and talk to us if you do get notice from student conduct that they believe that you have violated the code. We would love to talk to you, but just know that, we can't represent you, but also a private attorney that you would have to pay for might not be, won't be able to be speaking on your behalf, okay? They wouldn't be able to have the same role that they would in a criminal, in the criminal justice system, okay? Penalties range from, a letter that you have to write, an apology letter, suspension for a semester or a year, or ultimately expulsion from the university, being kicked out, never being allowed back in. That stuff goes on your transcript. That's going to follow you around when you want to transfer to another school, if you want to go to grad school, if you want to get a job and your employer asks for your transcript, like that will be on there that you went through the student conduct process. So take it very seriously. Student conduct doesn't mess around. Make sure you guys are following all the rules. If something comes up, please don't hesitate to come in and see us. We can certainly speak to you and give you some advice on how to proceed. So I'm gonna let Allie take over the rest of the slides here. Hope you guys have a good day.
So this is Allie Tucker. I am back to talk to you about an area that is near and dear to my heart. It's an area of representation that I did not necessarily think would be something that we would have to offer as a service, but I'm so glad that we do. So while also being the chief counsel on the criminal team, I also am the victims' rights attorney. So that includes a lot of things, but I do represent victims of violence, stalking, and harassment. So these couple slides are going to be about some tough stuff, but I think it's really important for you guys to be aware of the services that we provide surrounding these issues, because they're very sensitive, they're very emotional, they're traumatizing, and we are here for you. I just want to reiterate that everything that is talked about in our office and with our staff, over the phone, through email, it's all confidential. We are not mandatory reporters. We do not have to report anything to the university. So I would really encourage you guys to come and see us if you're having issues, you have questions, concerns, or something did actually happen, unfortunately. So as you guys know, alcohol and other drugs complicate sex, and they impair our judgment and make it very difficult for us to make good decisions. So when you are socializing and drinking and engaging in various behaviors, you need to be aware that you are going to be held responsible for your actions, whether or not you're intoxicated or impaired. And drugs and alcohol affect our ability to communicate, to effectively tell somebody to stop or what our boundaries are. They make it difficult to understand another person's behavior or communication. So I really encourage you guys to think long and hard about how you want to handle these social interactions, you know, from your own perspective. Whether you're a man or a woman, it does not matter. You need to know that being drunk is not a defense in these types of cases where someone is victimized. And you guys all have a student code of conduct that you are held to, and you need to be aware of it. And there are also laws that protect against being victimized. So you guys need to be aware of those things. That all applies to you. You can have consenting and positive sexual interactions while using drugs and alcohol. However, consent cannot be given by someone who is incapacitated. So someone who is drunk or high or even buzzed cannot give consent to anything. So that means that if you are engaging in any kind of sexual activity with someone who is intoxicated or impaired, they cannot give consent. Even if they tell you they consent, that is not considered consent under the law. And you need to be aware of that, because you are engaging in non-consensual sexual behavior at that point. There are a lot of resources out there for you. The Ohio State Collegiate Recovery Community is a great resource where it's a place for sober individuals to go on campus. It's not an easy thing to do on a college campus to get sober and stay sober, or to come to the campus sober and stay sober. This is a great community that supports other sober students, and I really encourage you guys to reach out to them. Counseling and consultation services is also a great resource for you guys. They provide counseling resources. And also SARNCO, the Sexual Assault Response Network of Central Ohio, is very close to my heart. They provide advocacy for victims and survivors of sexual assault, and we now have our own sexual assault advocates on campus dedicated to Ohio State students. And Emily and Susie are great, and they do great things, so I would encourage you to reach out to them if you need to. Another service that we offer is referrals. So we offer, if you're eligible for our services and you go to OU and you get cited for underage drinking, you need to come and see us or call us, and we'll do the intake and then send your information over to the OSU Student Legal Services, and they can represent you. Same thing, if your friend is here from BG and they paid their Bowling Green Student Legal Services fee, we can help them if they come to visit you and get in trouble. So we have reciprocity with these universities here. And that's really important for you to know, because a lot of people have friends at other universities in Ohio. And if something were to happen, we always want you to come and see us first. We always want you to come and see us first, even if you do not get into trouble within the jurisdiction of one of these universities, because we can at least point you in the right direction. And we really believe at Student Legal Services that, you know, one of our obligations and one of our responsibilities is to help in any way that we can. So even if it's not in Franklin County, or if it's not in the area of any of these universities, still come and see us, and we will really do as much as we can to help. Our office is located in the Gateway, right across from the Barnes & Noble. You can schedule an appointment by calling us or going online. I want you to know that if it's an emergency, you should pick up the phone and call us. We will get you in. We're very good about moving things around, especially for emergencies. There's no reason for you to ever pay for a private attorney, okay? We are skilled, experienced, and well-respected in this community, and we can and will help you. We are fully licensed practicing attorneys, and we're uniquely situated to handle legal matters that affect students, okay? Going off and paying $1,500 for legal services from a private attorney that knows nothing about the Franklin County court system or about students, it is a waste of your money. We are here to help. Okay, and if you have family members who are lawyers, I'm pretty sure they're going to think our service is phenomenal, and they'd rather you use us than use your uncle who lives in Idaho who knows nothing about criminal misdemeanors in Franklin County, Ohio. Okay, we are here for you. We also will help you figure out how to talk to your parents if something does go wrong. You know, it's not easy to tell our parents when we make mistakes, and I have helped many students figure out a way to tell their parents so that they can receive their support and move past it. So a lot of what we do may not be considered quote unquote lawyering, but we do support you guys. We're here for you, and we will do whatever we can to make sure that you have a successful career at Ohio State. you have any questions, unfortunately, we can't answer them right now, but I would encourage you to call or make an appointment, and one of our attorneys would be happy to meet with you. Thank you for taking this presentation, and go Bucks.